Could you perhaps first tell us something about yourself and how Dearly Departed came into being?
When I lived in Chicago, I had heard about another company out here in Los Angeles that was called Graveline Tours. And they used old Cadillac hearses and did sightseeing tours of where celebrities died. Now, when I lived in Chicago, I started a company called Dearly Departed. And I specialized in like T-shirts and keychains that had tombstones on them. So I became friends with the owner of Graveline Tours. And eventually I moved out here to run the company. A couple of years later, I moved to England, and during the time that I was there is when the internet sort of became popular. I developed a website called findadeath.com, and Find a Death specializes in the ends of celebrities' lives. If somebody said, Janis Joplin died in a book, it's usually the end of the story, and that's when I sort of start the story and tell, how she died, where she died, what happened to her body, who went to her funeral. So eventually, I moved back from England. I'd found out that the tour, Graveline, had been sold. The person that bought the tour killed himself. So I thought it was a rather poetic end to the whole thing, and started my own company called Dearly Departed Tours. It's been going about 5.5 years now, and I tried to make my company as good as Graveline was without copying the Graveline style.
Why do you think is Dearly Departed the stories of famous Hollywood crimes, murders, suicides, and such so popular?
Well, there has always been an interest in it. And also, now that we do have the internet, people don't have to sort of go out and admit it. They can just do things in the privacy of their own home and research these things. Now, what I've done is I've put together, to the best of my abilities, a sightseeing tour based on that information. So, if you look at what's going on in the tabloids, the Michael Jackson thing, there's nothing we don't know about how he died and what happened to his body. It's all public information, and it's all a fascination. So it's sort of like taking people to the news, as opposed to the news going to the people. I take people to where these things happen. We've all heard about George Michael being arrested and in the toilet in Beverly Hills. So, of course, I use that as my restroom break. And, just sort of, it's fun. It's gossipy, it's trashy, and it's just a lot of fun. And it's not too serious. I'm not cocky about a lot, but I know that the tour is really good. I wouldn't be selling it if I didn't believe in it. And the reviews have been good, so I'm happy.
What's your personal favorite Hollywood scandal?
Scandals? Well, the scandals right now, of the scandal of the moment that we've just added to the tour is the Rihanna incident, Chris Brown and Rihanna, Hugh Grant, Divine Brown, the George Michael thing, Winona Ryder shoplifting. I love all those stories. When I first started out, I was interested in, the biggies, Marilyn Monroe and James Dean. And that was before I moved out here to Los Angeles. I was sort of obsessed by them. So when I got to LA, I went to the pharmacy where Marilyn got her last prescription filled. And when I was living in Chicago, we drove the 6 hours to Indiana to where James Dean was buried. And then when I moved out to Los Angeles, my obsession became the murders that were orchestrated by Charles Manson. They call them the Manson murders. There are some people that really fascinate me. I'm still very interested in Marilyn Monroe and James Dean, but now I sort of am interested in the weird stories. Like there was a man named Albert Decker who had committed suicide quite dramatically, accidentally, doing what is now known as autoerotic asphyxiation. It wasn't just something that went wrong. It was spectacular how wrong it went. And these are, not a lot of people know who Albert Decker was. So to me, it's kind of neat to educate people about these stars that are long gone and long forgotten, and maybe they'll repeat it to their friends. And that way, Hollywood stays alive.
Charles Manson is one of the most famous American criminals. Why is that so?
The fact that the way he looks helps quite a bit, because Manson, he's only 5'2", but and he spent a vast majority of his life, he's 73 or 74 or something like that now, and he's been in prison for over 60 years. So on and off. The murders happened 40 years ago, but he had spent a lot of time in prison before that. So in order to survive in prison, this 5'2" man would have to act crazy, or they'd eat him alive. And so he's quite fascinating to watch anyway. Plus he's intelligent, and so there is a weird logic to what he has to say. I think another reason that people are interested is because, these were just normal kids that got involved with him, and how easy in the 60s it would have been to fall in with that group of people. And also, regarding the crimes themselves, they're movie stars, and they were involved with rock stars. You can actually, relate the Manson murders to almost everyone in Hollywood and everyone in the music industry. It's that fascinating. Rock stars and movie stars and producers. And in the 60s also, people couldn't tell the criminals from the stars. They all dressed the same and they all went to the same parties, I just think that it has all the ingredients of an amazing movie, except it's real life.
And what's the Helter Skelter tour?
Now, the book Helter Skelter that was written by Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecutor, basically tells the entire story. And I've read that book 3 or 4 times. The last time I read it, I decided to read it with a highlighter pen, and I highlighted all the addresses. And I just was, one at a time visiting them, where the killers, they washed off the blood in a driveway of a home, and where they threw the gun off the cliff, and that sort of thing. And I went out to visit them on my own. After a while, I started realizing there were other people that were interested in this case, and they wanted to know whether these things happened as well. So I put together the best I could, a 3.5-hour tour of Los Angeles. The farthest ends of the tour are the 2 murder locations and everything in between, where the Manson family hung out, where Mama Cass lived, of the Mamas and the Papas. And, and she knew the killers and the victims. And just sort of, I like to say it's the things you didn't know about the things you thought you knew everything about.
The Menendez brothers are also pretty famous for murdering their parents in 1989, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Menendez brothers are basically spoiled little rich boys, and they grew up with a wealthy family. And the father and mother, they were never going to win, father and mother of the year. They both had their problems. And Eric and Lyle, this was August 20th, 1989, decided to kill their parents with shotguns while they were watching television. They didn't know what hit them, literally. The kids broke into the room with guns and basically, they did just blow their parents away. So the weird thing about it is that they left the scene of the crime. They changed clothes. They got rid of the weapons, and they went back in and pretended to have stumbled on the crime scene. And then they phoned the police, and they masqueraded as grieving sons for several months, meanwhile spending their parents' fortune. Eventually, Eric, the younger of the two, told his psychiatrist that they were the ones that did it, and everything fell apart. And they were put on trial for killing their parents. Now, first they said it was the mafia that killed their parents, because Jose, the father, had some rather dubious ties. But when they were busted, they decided that they were sexually molested by their parents, and they feared for their own lives. But nobody believed that story, and now they're in prison for the rest of their lives with no chance of parole.